let's pick up where we left off last time. So we cleaned up the lamp, stripped out the damaged or worn parts, restored and refinished the lamp body and the shade, and now we're ready to wire and reinstall the socket. Now, as I mentioned before, I couldn't find a socket that had the right size thread nipple on it. The original was 1/8 inch, but the fixture I liked that had the 2 terminal connections that would allow for the tight space that all this has to be accommodated in needed to be swapped out. So we're going to switch these 2 out. Then we're going to go ahead and wire that in place. I've used my needle nose pliers to loop the ends of my wires that are coming through that need to be attached. And I also banged out that transition piece that I needed that was going to go between this eyelet and the shade. We made that out of some 5/16 inch copper rod that was, first I did some prototyping in wire, and then I took my rod and tapered the rod a bit because I needed something a little smaller in diameter than the 5/16. I needed to get it down to around 1/4 inch to be consistent with this element. And I'll drop in a few video clips of some of the forming work that I did to make that. And we also have a little clip of annealing that I had to do. So when we talk about annealing, that's something that you can easily do in your own studio with proper ventilation. Annealing is a heat treating process that we use to soften the material up to make it more malleable or ductile or easier to work. The process of forming rod results in the compression of the structure of that rod, which makes it more resistant to bending. And we can alleviate that compression that occurred in the material. When it comes to non-ferrous materials like copper, we do that by heating it up to what we call dull cherry red, which is when you just start to see some visible heat on the surface of the material, and then rapidly quenching it in water. So that will kind of freeze the structure in that open position. As you heat it up, those electrons move away from each other. And if you quench it rapidly, it will freeze in an open position, which means there's a lot of room left in between those, the atomic structure of it to allow it to be bent and manipulated. And so I had to go through at least 2 annealing cycles. The first one was to soften the material after I had hammer formed it to draw it out to the right diameter. And the second annealing was done after it was formed so that when I go to attach it, it will be malleable enough to be able to squeeze that in to the positions that it needs to hold on the lamp itself. I also treated that connecting component that I made in the same way that I did the shade by, after forming, I took the fire scale off the surface with a wire brush. I cleaned it with a degreaser. I gave it a patina or oxidized it using hydrogen peroxide and vinegar. And then I gently wire brushed off some of the oxide film on the surface, washed in clean water, dried it with the heat gun, and then put a coat of paste wax on the surface to give it that light luster. So let's go ahead and go about swapping these 2 parts out. So a single screw on the inside is going to allow this to be backed out. Oh, that's tight. I'm going to get this into I might benefit from getting this into a vise to hold on to it, but I'm going to give it one more try. I'm going to switch out to a different screwdriver. There we go. So I'm gonna drop that out. And again, I didn't like this guy because of all that excess wire coming off of it. There was no room to accommodate that wire in the inside of that shade. Pop that off. Okay. Now I'm gonna feed my looped ends through. Let's see, it's coming through, yep. Easier said than done. Remember, we're going to want our active wire, the black wire, to be connected to gold, and we're going to have our silver wire, our white wire connected to our silver screw. I want to make sure the loop is facing in the same direction as the screw is going to be rotating, because if it's looped over counterclockwise, it would tend to ride out of the position that we want it in. And as I tighten, that wire should snug up or climb in a little bit more. So you can see it's pulling the wire up underneath and snugging that into place. Now I'm going to go ahead and connect my neutral. Again, I would never do anything like this with live current. Much better. All right, now okay, I got a little ahead of myself in terms of order of procedure. I needed to put the nipple on and the coupling to allow me to attach from the male end of the nipple that was in the lamp with the nipple extension that I'm bringing out off of it to give me enough room to have everything fit in this properly. So I had to disconnect, sleeve this on, and now I can go ahead and slide these guys down and screw that in. And now I'm gonna, to secure everything in place, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this thin nut clockwise so that it tightens up against this flange so that they jam or force fit together. Now I can go ahead and draw up that excess length, and if I'm living right, be able to hold this from the inside and then rotate this guy. Okay, so I drew up that extra wire. I've fitted my coupling into place, and now I need to pinch it to get it to seat into those openings. So I went ahead and I took these slip joint pliers, and I've put some sturdy cardboard on the jaws and taped that in place so it doesn't mar the surface as I squeeze this guy in. the rest of our excess wire, pull it back through. Some light fixtures like desk lamps are intended to be able to be plugged into any outlet and moved around to wherever you need that source of lighting. Other lighting fixtures, like those that you find mounted into the ceiling or sometimes mounted on the wall, like this sconce, are what we call hardwired. And hardwired means that they don't have a plug that can be moved from one position to another. So I've got a little setup here that gives us a look at how we would hardwire a light fixture like this, and so that we can understand a little bit about what's going on. I've got an octagonal mounting box here, and I've got an octagonal mounting box here. Both have strap plates that are used for mounting fixtures to, that can be done with screws or with threaded nipples, like you see going through this guy right here. So what you typically have is you have, at minimum, 2 wires that are coming into that octagonal box that's mounted in the wall. And if you took a cover plate off of an outlet, you would be able to see this. But again, don't ever take off cover plates or do anything with live electricity. Make sure that you've gone to the breaker, shut that breaker off, and then tested it with a voltmeter or a volt detector like this to make sure it's not live before you take off that cover plate, because you have no idea what's going on behind that. There could be loose wires or something that could put you at risk. So anyway, once we've determined that the power is shut off to that outlet or to that switch, we'll come in, we'll test to see if there's any live electrical in there, and then we can start to, sort out what's going on. So what you would find is that box mounted flush to the wall, right? So this would be mounted flush to the surface of the wall. And inside we'd have wires that are fed through what's called conduit or electrical mechanical tubing. So it would be, that conduit would be held in place by one of these connectors. The wire would feed through. If the light fixture has a ground wire, then our ground wire would be attached to the light fixture. If our light fixture, like this sconce, only had 2 wires, a active wire and a neutral wire coming out, then we would attach the ground wire to this grounding screw that you see mounted here. Then we would always start with neutral, and we would twist those wires together and then screw on a wire nut. Twist those wires together, hold them at the base, and screw on that wire nut till it's secure. And again, I like to go ahead and wrap electric tape around these so that I have that extra level of insurance or security that and I'm also putting that tape on, rotating clockwise, the same direction the wire nuts went on, so that I'm not loosening them as I do that. And then all that jazz would get stuffed down inside of that octagonal box. So let's look at again, this is just kind of like a mock-up, but let's look at what we've got going on with this guy. So I'll turn this on its side so you can see what's going on. So if this was our wall section, our octagonal box would be mounted on the back of that wall with that strap plate across it. We would then have a small piece of that threaded nipple coming out, and we would need to have enough threaded nipple coming out that it would extend out beyond the face of this part of the lamp to give us enough projecting out to attach an end cap like this.